So let's start with the first presentation, the first paper. The floor is yours, Fergus. He's coming from Dublin University of Dublin, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's presenting the paper entitled Confrontational Male Humor in a Dublin Sports Club, Just Letting Things Go and Having a Laugh.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. So, I'll first situate the humour that I'm going to present in Club Fingal. That's the name of the club, the synonym of the club where I present, where I've done my research. It's I'll just give you overall the context, and then I'll introduce examples of what I call edgy humour or controversial humour. What I mean by edgy, I mean there's direct, bald-on record face threat. It's very challenging with a very biting type of teasing. But beyond the kind of chest-thumping, masculine sort of thing, there's a lot of things happening that demand attention. So that will be my main focus of the presentation. So just to give you just an overview of the sort of study that it was, it's a sociolinguistic ethnographic study. It's a yo-yo ethnography. At the time I was living in Japan, and I would have spent 2 or 3 months a year over a 5-year space of time going back to my club. It's a Gaelic football and hurling club, and I would have spent a lot of time in the club and just to see what sort of language they're using. And humour emerged to be very prevalent, and in particular I focused on the constructionist nature of variation. So there is a lot of variation. Individuals use different type of humour at different times, and what are the social functions of that variation. That was my main focus. So it's in Dublin, that's where, northwest Dublin, that's where it is. The two sports, if you haven't heard them before, they're Gaelic football and hurling. They are played on a pitch similar to a rugby pitch, but you can kick it forward, and the Gaelic football you can kick, and if you kick over the bar it's a point. Kick under the goal, it's 3 points. The hurling is kind of mixed between like hockey and lacrosse. It's a very fast, skillful game, very physical game. You can see this is a small island. There's 6,000 people in the island. There's about 2,600 clubs in the island itself. And if you go into small villages of maybe 100 people, you might have one pub, one shop, and you'll also have typically a GAA club with the sports, the social complex and the pitches. So it's very important to emphasise the important role that these GAA clubs perform in the society of Ireland. And if and when you're very good, you get to represent your county. All of those lines are counties there, and that's the kind of the elite there. So that's kind of important to know there. Just to go over what sort of study it was, as I said, lots of ethnographic observation. Basically me starting off, going back to the club. I'd spent maybe 15 years away from the club, going back, getting to know people again, getting to know people anew, training with the lads, just training 3 or 4 times a week, playing matches, having drinks after matches, socialising, going to see the big matches in the National Stadium, things like that. So after a while, once I got to know them, I asked them to interview. That's one-to-one interviews, which we use a lot for socio-phonetic data. But then I often saw these certain places where they use a lot of humour, and then I honed on them, and I tried to get the free recordings from them. So a lot of the data today comes from notes on the ethnographic observations of how people were using the humour, and also recordings of people having a small little microphone and recording playing matches, and also walking up to a match, maybe spending 2 hours having a few cans of beer and walking up and just having crack with the lads. The research question was, particularly it's men in men only environments. So all of this data comes from where there's no women at all. It's all men. So it's really focusing on, well, how do they use language to perform identities? And there is a performative element to it. The analysis is discourse analytical, and interpretations how they position themselves socially using language to a part. And there were three types of interactional identities that became salient. There's collegial, solidarity-based humour, then there's this kind of creating an authority, and then there's also this tough. What I mean by tough means it's aggressive, competitive, assertive type of identity. So that led to socio-phonetic and socio-pragmatic analysis, which I'm going to present today. Just to give you a review of socio-pragmatics in Ireland, what's thought about it, and how this positions to it, there is the thinking that speakers often do avoid directness or forwardness. You will see in this context that's not true. They do, and there are specific reasons why they do it. They don't. There is a lot of power work here, and they say, okay, one form of formality in close relationships is cursing, and what you see here is this edgy, confrontational type of humour is actually expressing closeness. That's one of the main functions of it. Okay, so I don't really need to focus too much on the humour, but what I would say in particular is it really is, a lot of the humour is relationship building, and it's relies very much on the hierarchy of the club, and those who are in the hierarchy of the club will bring the humour down, if you like. We know the functions of humour of hey, there is a lot of solidarity based, which I've focused on a little bit now, and then the power work, but also maybe what I want to say is it's very multifunctional. There's lots of different things happening in the data, and there's lots of different interpretations that you can take in. So now what I'm going to do is run through 5 or 6 excerpts, and I'm just going to first give you a background for you to understand what's happening, and then just to see what's happening socially in terms of the humour. Lucky, I know him quite well. I actually went to school with him, and I played a lot of football and hurling with him. He is currently a teacher, and he has that very much teacher persona, and he's very much been involved in the club straight through. He's about 42 now. He's been followed straight through, never took a break. Is a manager of the club, and he's very an authoritative sort of person. And during training, you can probably see from line 1 to 5 here, you can see he's saying, you can't just be running around the pitch running after the ball. You have to be thinking, like, what are you doing well, what you need to improve, and come to the next training session to improve yourself. So that serious sort of atmosphere he promotes. But he often promotes, listen, we're down here, we're amateurs, we're just having a bit of crack. It's very important to have a bit of fun. So you can probably see line 6 is probably transitioned from the serious part of training to having a bit of crack, having a bit of laugh. So you probably see, Box, his good friend, a real character in the club, says, Box, what did you do well? And probably hear straight away, that, okay, now if training's finished, let's have a bit of fun. And straight away Box, he says, oh, I turned up. That's my main thing that I done, I was just here. And then quick, straight away, Lucky says, you turned up, good man. And what did you not do so well? You turned up. So basically, the negative things are saying, you being here. So this may see as a type of, it is a put down, but it's teasing, but it's a bonding type of teasing. And a lot of the lads, like player A says, like this likes an ongoing lovers tiffs, because this sort of interaction happens all the time, and it's just a way to have a bit of fun. And so what I would say here, this type of teasing it's a boundary between the C's work of winning your place on the team, but then also having a bit of crack with the lads afterwards. But here, what I'm going to focus on now, the edgy humour, you have your bonding type of teasing, you have your biting, which is just attacking people, and more typically you have your nipping, which has a bit of a bond and a bit of a bite. The climb that I see here in this edgy confrontational humour goes from nipping to a very biting type of humour. And I'm just going to give you examples of these. The first example, the person being made fun of is me. I'm being made fun of, basically. So what happens is, we just had a shower, we go outside of the training, the changing room, and then there's a gate, and then there's been a match played across the gate. So we're standing on the gate looking over at the match. And I saw a very famous Dublin footballer, Finney Murphy is his name. And I said, I knew he's about 50 now, but he was taking his clothes off, getting to go on to for the last 10 minutes of the game. He's a very good footballer, and I knew that he had spent maybe 2 or 3 years down in the south part of Ireland, Kerry, away from Dublin. And I said to him, you know, it's great that he came back from Dublin, from Kerry, and he's back in Dublin. And free. He says, what are you talking about? And you see there's a lot of an expletive here, you know. You've been away for so long. I was away for 15 years this time. He said, be away for so long, you're making up stories. What do you think? And he said to another speaker, 2 and 4, and they started ganging up on me. He says, hold on, let's go over and ask him. Because I knew I actually have a newspaper article that states that he's lived down in this place for 2 years. So I know I'm correct here. It says, here, you see the last line from 12 to 16. It says, I think you really are mad, Fergus. You know that they're just making fun of me here. So you see, this is it's a direct insult, and it's challenging me. But a lot of this Free himself, he is this type of challenging, assertive sort of individual who will always challenge people with this. But I think the direct insult, it's more playful than derogatory, and it's more challenging to get a reaction as opposed to actually directly insulting people. So this is representative of a lot of the humour used in the club. The next example is where people are asserting their authority. This is the situation in the club bar. They have a bar, and Derby and Pass, 2 players who know each other very well, played a lot together. We're having a pint together, and I walked in, and Pass's father-in-law is right beside him, and there's lots of people around just having a casual drink. And Derby and Pass, there was a lapse in conversation, so they start picking up on something, a regular thread that they talk about. This was a big game that they played together, and the situation was that Derby was running through on goal, and he had a choice to either go through, shoot for himself, or go through, draw a man, give it to Pass, and Pass could have scored. He chose to go himself, and he kicked it wide. The ball went up the pitch, the other field, the other team scored a goal, they won the game. So this has been something that they pass through all the time. It says, Pass, you should have passed to me. Derby, no, I should have went through, I had a better chance. And they went through this about a minute going, and then Pass just said, listen, Derby, you are tactically inept. You have no tactics. You're not a good footballer. And Derby says, you can't be fucking saying that, Pass, you know. He says, oh, I'm a manager, he is a manager, he's a manager of the team, where Pass is just a regular player. And he just puts him down. I'm a leader in this club, and you're only just a lowly player. So on the surface, this seems like it is a direct insult, but they're just joking. They're just having a thing. In fact, I would say here, because they know each other so well, this is why they can have this type of direct insults as a type of humour. If they didn't know them so well, they wouldn't attack each other like this. So, in a way, this type of edgy humour is a way to express their closeness. If you only really do this unless you know people very well. So that's one thing that I really found in the data that I present. Thank you. The next one, what I go on to, is really aggressively competitive people. Just to give you a bit of background of this speaker, there's 3 contexts here. This speaker is really well established in the club. His father is known as a club legend, if you look on social media, and he does a lot of work in the club. His situation in the community is he's a police officer, so he really sees himself as someone who's high up in the status. And he says during the first interaction here, he made a mistake, and he said about the rules. There's 4 or 5 lads on the sideline just talking about the game, and he made one mistake about the rule, and he was commenting, says, no, that's a mistake. He says, okay, you can say that, and I agree I was wrong, but doesn't change the fact that I know more about football than you. And everyone just starts laughing at the other fella. So basically, one of his common styles is to make fun of the people, and to push him. While he's making fun of them, he pushes himself up, puts himself up at a higher status. So this is the type of thing that people often do in the club. The last situation, I've just devalued your house by a few €1,000. He, as I said, he's a police officer. He was in the bar on a Saturday night, and on that Saturday morning he had found a big consignment of heroin, drugs, in a well-to-do area where the people who were in the bar lived. And he just kind of said, haha, what I've done here, this is going to get into newspapers, and as a result, your house is going to go down. You're just talking about selling your house, means you're going to get less money. So basically he's saying, all these things I've done, you're going to impact on it. And also, the main message here is basically, I'm better than you. That's what he's saying. But it's just as, does this ever stop? It doesn't stop. The only way to stop it is to react to it and to put him down in another way. So this sort of banter is something, and it's only really men only, I find, in this context anyway. But so it's aggressively competitive, masculine, but it's only done just to have a bit of crack, just have a bit of fun. The last one, macho belittling. This situation is, we had won a big game, we went out, we ended up in a nightclub, we ended up back in someone's house, and woke up the next day, about 5 of us, in Peace's house. Peace is a baker. He actually baked the cake for my wedding. Very great baker. But he's no good at making things, you know. And he had a flat pack table from IKEA. He had to make it. But he knew he couldn't make it himself. But he knew in the room at the time, having a breakfast, were some qualified carpenters. So he just started making it, and then he just kind of said, Jesus, no, maybe I used the wrong piece to begin and I can't make it. And eventually, qualified just said, hey, get out of my way. Let a qualified carpenter take over. So, no, I just need a few minutes to work. No, get out of the way. Go bake a cake. Go bake a fucking cake, basically. So basically, it's a very gendered interaction here. Basically, what they're saying is, qualified is saying, I am someone who's qualified to do this, who can do this manly sort of job, and you're only just a baker who has this kind of feminine type of job. So, again, this sort of interaction is, these insults are not sanctioned anywhere else. If you've done this in a lot of workplaces, if you behave like this in a lot of families or a lot of other regular friendship groups, it causes a lot of problems. But in the sports club, when there's only just the lads there, that's the only really time you can behave like this. And I find that's a very important part of this humour. It's just a way to, this sort of humour, it's a way to just let yourself go and to do things that you can't really do anywhere else. So to validate your masculinity, if you like. So the quote that the title comes from is a lad who had been unemployed, had was feeling low about himself, and he was saying, what was really kept me going through that 6 months, he was working at the time, but 6 months he had no job, was being involved with the club and going down with the lads. And without that, I would have been lost. And this is what, when I asked him, what's that? No, it's just a combination of being with people you enjoy of. It's the humour. It's dropping your guard, being a little boy, messing around, lads, cracking jokes. I'm back in the club, I'm coaching under 12s, and this is a big problem in the training sessions because the lads just have a laugh. And saying, lads, we want you to actually play football too. So, but basically this sort of humour is just letting yourself go, having a laugh, and that's the major part that I find of this confrontational male humour. But at the end of it, it's not really confrontational. It's just having a joke, and it's a way of expressing yourself and expressing closeness and also expressing your manness, if you like. So, thank you for listening today.
Thank you very much, Fergus. We have time for a couple of questions. Yeah? Perdón, le coge el micrófono.
Yeah.
Hey.
First of all, thank you. I'm Sol. I'm from the University of Warwick. I'm really interested in your research because I did research in a male football team myself, soccer, and like having seen these like very masculine styles of humor, I'm really interested in like how, first of all, did you identify the humorous intention, but also what was the speaker reaction? For example, the hearer reaction. Sorry. For example, when you were speaking about the baker, how did he actually react? Was it maybe failed humor then, or was it always supported?
How did I identify the intentions? I just interpreted it really. You can't, in sociolinguistics, you can't claim divinity, you can't really claim what people are thinking. You can only just interpret it. That'd be the answer to the first question. How did the baker react to that? All the lads were joking and laughing, and then he just kept on going. So he didn't really react to it. He just kept on going. We went out and we had dinner later that, and he made it a point of getting him back on another point. So he bided his time, and then he got him back later.
So every humor attempt was always successful?
Well, yes, there's lots of laughs. The only chance I've seen it, that's a long, long time ago, where people took offence to the humour. They didn't do anything, but they made the point to attack that person physically in training afterwards. Just hit them hard, basically. So, yeah, that's the best answer I can give. Yeah?
Okay, one more. Yeah.
Thanks very much for your talk. I found it very interesting. And I was just wondering, I mean, just letting things go and having a laugh is okay to a certain degree, but what you also mentioned about multifunctionality of humor, my distant memories of being in a club like that, you know, male
Yes.
banter and that kind of thing, I think there's a lot of negotiating hierarchical order in the team as well. And this thing about the previous question, I think the worst thing he could do was take offense, because that was the ultimate failure, not paying back kind of thing. And it was always, you know, topping another one's insult, but just a little bit, so that the equilibrium was sort of re-established kind of thing. And, you know, it's also about turn taking in a way. Somebody makes a remark and, you know, they outdo each other in, you know, shouting on top of each other. Turn taking is the loudest wins kind of thing. And I thought that there was a lot of male competition, hierarchical order negotiation there. My own experience only.
If I agree with you, and if it's expected that you reply in turn in some shape or form. If you don't, it's kind of black mark against you. And all hierarchy, it's often those in the perceived hierarchy who would joke downwards, and those who are there sanctioned more to take the joke, take the field. Yeah? But, okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the next presenter will be Jassim Kakalik. Yeah, she will be talking on I better adapt myself, using humor to construct, negotiate, and challenge identities by drawing on media coverage around social integration of German Turkish descendants.
Hello everyone, welcome to this presentation. Thank you very much for your interest and for joining. Oh, okay, yes. Okay, well, now better? Yeah. I'm a second-year PhD student from the University of Warwick, the Center of Applied Linguistics. And today I'll be talking to you about how German-Turkish adolescents use humor as a strategy to challenge dominant discourses around social integration. This is my first attendance at an international conference, so I'm quite excited and I look forward to the experience and also to your feedback. So first of all, let me start with my motivation for looking at humor specifically. The interest in humor arose through my PhD project, which is looking at issues of social integration experienced by German-Turkish adolescents. So I'm interested in how these individuals make sense of their own social integration and how they talk about these issues. And more specifically, I want to understand how hegemonic discourses around social integration and Turkish people circulate the media landscape, the German media landscape, and how it constructs social realities, which then in turn influence self-perceptions and identity constructions of German-Turkish individuals. So how do they actually talk about their own experiences, and how do they thereby construct and negotiate their own identities? And a motivation for actually pursuing this study is because one of the factors is that I'm also a German Turk myself, so I also have a personal interest in conducting this study. So during data collection for my PhD research, I could observe an abundance of humor, which was not expected. So that's why I included this aspect in my research. It will probably become an important part, a main part. And thus the focus of this presentation today is to understand and to unpack how German-Turkish people use humor as a strategy to cope with issues of social integration, and how they challenge dominant discourses around these issues. So let me start by giving you a brief overview of the German-Turkish community in Germany. So the Turkish migration to Germany began in the guest worker period in the 1950s, 60s, where Germany invited people from Poland, Greece, Italy, and many other countries, and also from Turkey, obviously, to help rebuild the country. As the name indicates, guest worker, it was planned that these people go back to their countries once Germany was stabilized. However, after living in the country for several years, they brought their families to them, so there were many family a lot of movements of Turkish people to the country. And then the next generations were born there, and now they are an important part of Germany and make up the largest ethnic minority there, with almost 4 million citizens. And research clearly shows that the majority of Turkish origin people perform less well socioeconomically than other ethnic groups. They, in terms of education, labor, employment, language proficiencies, and so on. So they score very low in education, very high in unemployment rates. They have issues with languages, to name but few. And that has led the situation, it has made them a main target in integration debates by journalists, scholars, politicians, and the media. So they are regarded as the hardest to integrate population group in Germany. And altogether, this has led to a very negative image in wider society in Germany. So, and in turn, this has led, has created this situation that they are target for racism and discrimination. However, there's also the other share, people who actually do perform well socioeconomically and who regard themselves as Germans and see Germany as their home. They are heavily overlooked within these negative numbers, and thus they're exposed to high levels of generalizations and stereotypes. So now that I've given you an overview of the Turkish community in Germany, I just want to quickly draw your attention to the concept of identity construction, because identity is a main part in my research. I adopt a social constructionist view, which sees identity as a fluid and dynamic construct, very high context dependent, and that identity is constantly created and recreated through interaction and language. And within this paradigm, I see humor as a strategy used by people to claim identities for themselves and others. I won't go in detail because probably most of you already have a background in humor. So how did I actually collect my data? The main data collection method was the use of focus groups, where 3 to 5 participants across gender and age were given specific excerpts of media, German media, which were dealing with issues of integration or people of Turkish origin or social integration and so on. And then afterwards they were asked to discuss these issues in the group. And I also gave the option of conducting face-to-face interviews because these topics are mostly very personal and sensitive because people are talking about issues of discrimination, racism, and so on. So some people might feel more comfortable in talking in individual basis. However, I just ended up having 3 interviews because most of the people felt quite comfortable in group discussions, although not all of them knew each other. So there were people who had pre-existing relationships and also people who didn't know each other at all. Yes, so overall I had 17 hours of audio recorded and video recorded discussions, spread it over 7 focus groups and 3 interviews, and in total I had 24 participants. So as I said before, I could detect a lot of humor, as already during the group discussions, but especially during the transcription. There were many humorous statements, which I didn't expect. As I said before, like, topics are quite sensitive and personal. So I decided to include this in my research as well. And since I didn't expect it at all, it was quite interesting to look at humor specifically. Okay, so let's move on to the examples. I have 3 examples for you. First, I want to give you the context, and then I will follow with the indicative analysis. And at this stage, I'm quite at the beginning with the analysis, so it's not like a very deep analysis, just an indicative one, but I still hope you'll find it interesting. Okay, so this is the first one. Here, after reading an article, or an excerpt of the article, which was dealing with socioeconomic levels of Turkish people, E, a male participant, says that it is their, and he means the Turks, he's saying the Turks, it's their own fault that they are not integrated because they don't use the language properly, they just speak Turkish amongst themselves, and factors like this. Then he also says, also because, and then he says we, and he includes himself, because we are already discriminated, no matter how well integrated, no matter how well we speak German. So he says, I think integration worked well for me, I believe so, and then he laughs. Then there's immediate joint laughter, and then L says, you'd think, and laughs. And then there's joint laughter again. So first of all, E is constructing himself as a person who is integrated and not integrated at the same time, because he says, I think integration worked well for me. So he says, I am integrated, but using words like I think and I believe so, he's questioning his own statement and signals a possibility that his statement might not be 100% accurate, that he might not be integrated. However, his laughter obviously gives clues that it is meant playfully and humorous. So he's also threatening his own face by making fun of his own weakness, the issue of integration, which circulates widely, like media debates about integration and Turks and so on, they circulate widely, and that they are not really integrated and so on. So he uses this humor and threatens his own face. However, by doing that, he's trying to signal that he's in this control of the situation. So he orients towards institutionalized representations of Turkish people, and he's making fun of those mainstream and hegemonic discourses, and at the same time distancing himself from those discourses. Yeah, and also partially self-deprecating humor, because he's making fun of himself, and he uses this kind of humor to resist imposed depictions and imposed identities of Turks. Then T is responding and says, you'd think, so he's teasing E, and he's implying that he's not integrated. So he's teasing and mocking him. However, by laughing, and also E and L have a pre-existing relationship, so they know each other. So these two factors, the laughter and the relationship, they give clues that it is meant as playful and as humorous. So he's in a way playfully joining E by making fun of those mainstream discourses. And so together they are challenging and distancing each other from those representations of Turks which dominate the media landscape. And then the joint laughter after each statement, it signals shared sense of humor and an in-group membership, and also all of them have enough background knowledge to understand both statements. Also by laughing, they know that E would not take it personal, the statements, because I mean L is saying you are not really integrated, and he himself makes fun of himself. So yeah, they have enough knowledge to appreciate E's and L's humorous attempts. Okay, number 2. So here, after 45 minutes of discussion, M, a female participant, she gets an apple and she wants to cut it into pieces so that everyone in the group can have a piece. Then she's asking, is it okay if I put the apple here, or should I put it there? Points to another direction. And then T says, no way, oh my God, where are you from? Are you from Turkey or what? In a sarcastic tone of voice. Then there is immediate joint laughter. Then M says, I'm just asking. She's laughing and says, I'm just asking, I better adapt myself, and laughs again. Then there's joint laughter. So first of all, it's important to say that M had no intentions to use humor. She really just wanted to know if she can put the apple pieces in the table in front of her, on the plate in front of her. But T is immediately starting to teasing her. I have to say, of course I said it before, but in the group discussions we were discussing talk shows or media articles which were dealing with these kind of issues. So she's teasing her, and this can be seen as potentially insulting or aggressive, because she's making fun of her and disparaging her question or behavior as not appropriate. So she's saying, implicitly she's saying, like, why are you asking these questions? Why are you doing this? Are you from Turkey or what? And that means that she's drawing on macro-level demographic categories and also on societal ideologies and discourses around these issues, around depictions of Turks, which are represented as the others and as victims who are not able to behave themselves and who are not really integrated. So, yeah, she's doing that by associating her behavior with a Turkish background, with a Turkish cultural background. Thus, she's indexing a negative stance towards Turkish people. However, M, she does not take it personal. She's laughing, and she's playfully joining T's attempt of making fun of these discourses. She is performing a behavior which is stereotypically associated with Turkishness in wider society. So she's taking on, of course, yeah, she's making fun of existing stereotypes. So together with T, they are taking on temporary roles. So M is taking on the role of the typical Turk, who doesn't know how to behave. And T is taking on the role of the typical German, who thinks or who believes that Turkish people are not yet fully integrated and they don't know how to behave themselves. So M is constructing her Turkish ethnic identity, and T is positioning herself as a non-Turk in that situation. Then also the word adapt has an important meaning here. It has a strong connotation because of the far-reaching and omnipresent discourses around integration in Germany since the labor recruitment in the 1950s and 60s. So the word adaptation and adapt is constantly used in relation with foreigners or migrants, especially with Turks, because, as I said, they are the largest ethnic minority. Again, the joint laughter signals shared background info, so all of them understand this joke and appreciate it. They have a shared sense of humor, and also the laughter signals in-group membership. Example 3. This group was one of the last ones, and this was the only group where all participants were below the age of 18. So they are talking about the right-wing party in Germany, which recently received many votes. And they're saying that their approaches are racist towards immigrant people in Germany or people of foreign origin. So B is saying, I just don't understand what the aim is. So deporting all Turks, and then what happens then? Who's going to clean the toilets? And then she laughs. Yes, shocking. So B is first of all criticizing and questioning the approaches, the AfD, by the way, that's the name of the right-wing party. The approaches of this right-wing party. She's saying, I don't understand, what is their aim? Why do they do that? And she's using a very derogative word, deporting, in Germany, abschieben, and it's quite derogative because it means that foreigners, they are not belonging to the country, really. They have to go to where they come from. They are not part of Germany. So it's quite derogative, and she's also distancing herself in that moment from this community by saying all Turks, so the Turks. So she's constructing her individual identity. And it is, then the key sentence, who is going to clean the toilets, it is self-denigrating humor, because she's associating like low-level tasks. I'm not saying it's low-level, but by society it's still seen as an employment which are done by people who have a low social status or class, because these kind of tasks are done by people who they don't have to have high education levels, they don't have to speak German perfectly. So it's self-denigrating humor that she's associating these tasks, cleaning tasks, especially cleaning toilets, with people from a Turkish background. And yeah, so she's also referring to the guest workers from the 1960s, because those people came from villages in Turkey. They didn't know how to speak German, of course. They didn't have high education levels, so they were engaged in cleaning tasks or construction or any kind of jobs where you don't have to speak German necessarily. So she's comparing the new generations still with the guest worker, people from the guest worker time. So she's also implying failed integration, because even to date people are associating these, as I said, these kind of employment with low levels of integration, so also with foreigners. So in a way she's actually representing and reproducing these discourses circulating around Turkish people, because she's associating these tasks with their background. However, with this humorous attempt, she's actually provocatively challenging these kind of imposed representations or these kind of discourses. And again, there's joint laughter. So actually the joint laughter is supporting her and ratify this attempt of making fun of these discourses. And of course, shared sense of humor, insider knowledge, and in-group membership. And also this can be seen as a coping mechanism. Oh, I forgot to say that it is also self-denigrating, because they told me that all of the parents from these participants, they are also engaged in cleaning tasks, actually. So in a way, it's like double self-denigrating. So it's a coping mechanism for them, because they use it to resist and reject these imposed representations of Turks, and to make collaboratively to make meaning of this situation, of these representations, also the actual situation. Yes. So okay. Okay. So I tried to illustrate how my participants use different types of humor to portray themselves as firstly fully integrated, thereby questioning the legitimization of current media debates around integration and German-Turkish people. But at the same time, how they position themselves as outsiders, and ironically and sometimes even sarcastically, and how they display discriminatory stereotypical characteristics often assigned to German-Turkish people in Germany. So actually there was a famous storyline which could be observed. The first one is being integrated. So I am integrated, we are integrated, which the first example illustrates. Second one, trying to be integrated, trying to adapt, which the second example illustrates. And the third one, trying to adapt and integrate, but this has failed. So this is like integration along a continuum. So this case study, I tried to illustrate how people use humor as a mechanism to make fun of and at the same time criticize difficulties of social integration, both on an individual and on a wider societal level, and how people can use humor as a strategy to talk about the unsayable, to collaboratively make meaning of their own experiences and of a very difficult situation, and to challenge, resist, and possibly change mainstream discourse around representations of German-Turkish people. And so, with their humorous exchanges, people are implicitly adopting, while at the same time distancing themselves from these identities and from the stereotypically assigned, imposed identities to Turkish people by the media. And so they are implicitly rejecting and protesting these mainstream images. Thank you.
So We have time again for a couple of questions. Helga?
Thank you for the talk. Does it play a role for these young people that there are several German-Turkish comedians which are extremely successful on German TV, such as Bülent Ceylan, İdil Baydar? So I think the image of the Turks is a little bit more complex nowadays in Germany. The one question is this: does it play a role for them that they have Kaya Yanar and Bülent Ceylan? And it is, for the last 20 years, it is an own tradition of playing with stereotypes and, yeah. And the other question is, don't these youngsters also play with stereotypes? That is what we also had a project on multicultural youth cliques in Freiburg, and they do a lot of playing with it. But in a sense, it is also a way of distancing from stereotypes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I would say comedians like Kaya Jana, for example, or the other ones you've mentioned, I think they... Oh, sorry.
The microphone, can you hear?
Thanks. So I think they are quite important why German-Turkish people use these kind of challenging humor in order to position themselves, because especially those comedians, they do this the same a lot. They play with stereotypes in order to challenge these kind of imposed identities. They make fun of themselves a lot.
Not only, and they make a lot of fun of Germans and
Yeah.
Russians, and they have
Yeah.
broad scope.
Also stereotypes about Germans and Russians and everything, yeah. They do that as well, yeah, but I would say they also make fun of themselves, of typical depictions of themselves. So maybe they serve as a motivation or inspiration why normal citizens in Germany of Turkish origin use these kind of humor. Maybe, yeah. But I could look more into that. Thank you.
Okay, any other question? Yeah?
Thanks so much. I was wondering, in your analysis, you said that the joint laughter, and I agree completely, seems to have some kind of basis of similar knowledge and acceptance and kind of being a group and in-group marker, etc. But I was wondering at some points, especially, like personally, I couldn't hold myself laughing at the third example with the who would clean all the toilets, because that's like a common stereotype. Do you have any idea or any indication that the laughter, the joint laughter, also might indicate discomfort or some kind of bitterness towards these stereotypes because they are still persistent, although in our German culture, like lots of Turkish people are integrated, etc. Is there some sort of indication for that?
I could not really feel an awkward situation, so they really were laughing about the situation, and they really... Was I loud enough? So I could not really sense an awkward situation after this statement. But you're right, I mean, these stereotypes still exist, and also it's an actual situation because their parents are also engaged in cleaning tasks. So maybe deep inside there might be a kind of bitterness and not wanting to accept this fact. But in that situation, it was like pure laughter, and yeah, I would say they meant it in that way. Yeah. Thank you too.
Yeah, one more. Many questions for success.
Okay, could this cleaning of toilets punchline be targeting Germans as well as people unable of cleaning after their own dirt? In a reversed way, giving face to the people who actually do the cleaning?
Yes, you're right, because in a way they are saying, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Because if Germans, obviously, as you said,
Unable to.
Yeah, they are not able to, or they don't want to, or whichever they mean. Yeah, so they are saying we are kind of responsible if we don't do it, like, yeah.
Yeah, and another question, is there humor inside minority groups like the German Turks, of people, immigrants of Turkish origin against the people of immigrants, I mean, of other origins, like against Greeks or, I don't know, the Balkans?
Yeah. Sorry, what?
Have you spotted humor against other minority groups?
Okay, I see.
Except for self-deprecating humor or humor targeting the Germans, is there humor targeting other minority groups, Gastarbeiters?
It was not really an attack towards other people from other ethnic groups, but they more used, for example, people, for example, Arabic people or people from Iran or people from South Europe or Middle East, to put them into their own group and construct a group identity, because they are saying we foreigners, and with we foreigners they mean like we, us Turks, us Arabians, we are not accepted by society because they have a more different culture than also a Muslim background. Yeah, they refer a lot to religion, that's true, because that's an important factor, but I didn't include religion here. So they actually, there's something like South Europeans or Middle East Europeans, foreigners, and also the Western Europeans, because they mostly say, in all focus groups, they say Spanish people, they are not foreigners, they are Spanish people. Italian people are Italian people. But Turkish people, they are foreigners. Or Arabic people, they are foreigners. So they didn't attack them in a way, they included them in their group, I would say, by using humor.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid we don't have more time for questions, but you can talk to this later. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Müge Erdenler. I'm a PhD student at the Technical University of Berlin in linguistics. Today I'm going to talk about my finished master thesis project, actually. In my master thesis project, I analyzed the pride discourses of Turkey and the United States, and I analyzed the identity construction in the pride parades. And I looked at the linguistic strategies they used, and humor was one of them. Now I'm going to talk about only that part of my thesis. So first of all, I'll talk about my data and then theories I used, and after that I'll give you information about humorous discourse with the examples, of course. And in the end, I'll provide you with further implications and my references. So first up, my data. So I collected the phrases which appear on the protest signs, banners, graffiti, and street writings, and also the slogans shouted during the pride parades. And I collected my data online, mostly from the famous social media websites like Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Tumblr, and for slogans, YouTube, of course. So for the phrases, I collected images, which I'm going to show you shortly. And in total, I gleaned 26 English and 28 Turkish phrases. Yeah. Next up, theories. So I based my study on queer theory. So queer theory emerged as a reaction to the gay and lesbian rights movement in the United States in the 70s and 80s, when many activists started to question the existence of a coherent lesbian and gay male identities. And queer linguistics hence also is about questioning the coherent lesbian and gay speaking style. So it questions the naturalness of the gendered practices and where the notion of being a woman or man actually comes from. It brings a queer perspective into the field of linguistics and digging into the fuzzy boundaries of gender and sexuality. It avoids establishing well-defined identity categories and making generalizations about linguistic behaviors of a particular identity group. And also it focuses on, most important, the local discourses, and is concerned with the emergence of identities that are bound to a particular local discourse context. And there are many scholars who conducted studies based on a queer approach, and most importantly Mary Buchholz and Kyra Hall. So I used their model in my study. So they approach identity as a relational and sociocultural phenomenon that emerges and circulates in local discourse context of interaction rather than as a stable structure located primarily in the individual psyche or in fixed social categories. And they believe that identity is intersubjectively constructed within local interactional context. And they come up with 5 different identity principles. These are emergence, positionality, indexicality, relationality, and partialness principle. And in my presentation, I'm going to look at only indexicality and relationality principle, because humorous discourse appears in those principles. So first up, indexicality principle. Those who listen to Professor Hedkopp's talk maybe are familiar with the index. So index is a linguistic form that depends on the interactional context for its meaning. And Buchholz and Hall argue that indexical processes occur in 4 different stages. And now I'm going to focus on the 4th one, which is the use of linguistic structures and systems that are ideologically associated with specific personas and groups. And in my data, I detected camp talk. And camp talk, according to Keith Harvey, is the effeminate talking style, which is based on a parody of women's behavior. That is an exaggerated feminine side, not like women are. And he argues that there are particular linguistic strategies which are associated with queer identity, and which creates also a playful and funny effect, of course. And he comes up with 4 different linguistic practices. These are paradox, inversion, ludicrism, and parody. And in my data, I detected examples for ludicrism and parody, which I'm going to show you. So for example, ludicrism through word plays in English data. So sorry, one back. So ludicrism occurs through puns and word plays and double entendre. And here, for example, in my English data, in the first one, homosex is sensational. There's a word play going on there. They changed the word sensational into sensational. It's actually about the Christian belief that practicing homosexual sex is a sin, so they change it and try to say we practice homosexual sex and it's sensational. And in the second one, guys, I said I had figs. So they make a reference to the part in the Bible which Jesus curses at the fig tree because it's barren. But by figs they mean actually fags, of course. And they said he doesn't he doesn't dislike fags, but he dislikes figs. So you misunderstood. And in the Turkish data, there's this double entendre. So dönmeyiz has 2 meanings. And first one, it's an inflected verb, which means we don't go back or we don't return. And also it means tranny, we are trannies. So in this way, they try to say we are trannies and we are not going back from this. We are going to keep being trannies. And another Turkish example is trans is lovely. And there's a phonetic, transgender is the Turkish pronunciation. So there's a phonetic similarity between gender and the English gender. And what they are trying to do here, we transgender people are lovely. And next, feminine parody, also one of the linguistic practices of Keith Harvey's Camp Talk. And I detected some exclamation in Turkish data. So this ayol is very an exclamation which is extremely associated with extreme feminine characters, and they insert this exclamation while they are actually talking about something really serious, which is like, what is prohibition? It's against the oppression exercised by the government. And also in the sixth one, we are resisting, and that exclamation, in a way they tease the context, but also talk about something serious. And I found one example in my English data. So in this one, I bet hell is fabulous. So it's actually against the view, again, that homosexual people are gonna end up in hell because they are sinners. And but they say, I bet hell is fabulous. And this fabulous, I think, could be an example for feminine parody, because according to Robin Lakoff's theory of women's speech, women are more likely to use empty adjectives such as adorable, charming, lovely, sweet, divine, and so on. And I think fabulous could be an example of those. And they insert this one and make it sound more feminine in a parodic way. And in this way, they make fun of the idea of that gay people are gonna wind up in hell. And then the second principle is the relationality principle. As the name implies, it's about the relational aspect of identity. So identities acquire different social meanings through different social positions and social actors. And Buckles and Hall's intention is to demonstrate that identities are never autonomous or independent, and they question the common view on identity relations, which rests on binary opposition, sameness, and difference. And they suggest some processes where identities are constructed through different dimensions of relationality. So in a nutshell, they say we tend to construct our identity linguistically by liken ourselves to a specific group or unliken ourselves to a specific group. So departing from the different dimensions of relationality, they introduce 3 different pairs of tactics where identities are discursively constructed. These are adequation versus distinction, authenticization versus denaturalization, and authorization versus illegitimation. And I'm not going through all of this. I'm going to just focus on the second one, authenticization versus denaturalization, because humorous discourse emerges in the denaturalization. So while authenticization reveals the construction of true identity, denaturalization is about how the aspects of identity can be disrupted. By definition, denaturalization refers to the violation of ideological expectation of an identity category. So in the pride parades, they really violate the ideological expectations from their identity category. And they do it in 3 different ways. These are putting their sexuality at the forefront, like really over-sexualizing the context, and by modifying the words of politicians in order to mock the power, and also by using elements from popular culture. And the first one, sexualization of the context in English data, again we see homosex is sensational. And 9, I'm not going to read it out loud. And 10 was going to make a sign, but too busy having gay sex. And also 11, you can read, I hope. And there's also a bunch in Turkish data. So this is just a foreplay. With this one, they mean we are at the beginning of the struggle. We are gonna keep fighting. And on the 13th one, leg to shoulder against fascism. It's actually a deviation from the slogan shoulder to shoulder against fascism, but they insert leg instead of shoulder and make it more sexual. And more, let them make love. And I lost my prudery and I'm not looking for it. Or a slogan going, we will win by making love. Yeah, these are the examples for the sexualization of the context. And the second one is modifying politicians' own words in English data first. So make America gay again actually comes from Trump's political slogan, make America great again. And they say gay instead of great. And they make fun of his slogan, also criticizes his homophobic approach. And in the Turkish one, this is actually a bit different. Say we are faggots. So this say, which is velevki in Turkish, is a really outdated way of saying or constructing a conditional phrase. So nobody really uses it in daily language, but President Erdogan was used to do it a lot at some point, and they actually make fun of him by saying, say we are faggots, and by using the structure that he uses. And in this way, they try to say we are faggots, so what's wrong about it? So, and but you can, if like a Turkish person would understand that they actually mock President Erdogan. And the last one, using elements from popular culture. So these elements mostly consist of song lyrics or some public gay figures. Some scholars argue that by using elements from popular culture in the protest, the protesters subvert popular culture and use it in an anti-authority format. By doing so, they deconstruct the popular culture, invert it, and create an alternative culture. As a result, by tackling a serious issue in a ridiculous context, they criticize mainstream fashion and challenge the universality of dominant ideology, and at the same time they undermine and mock authority. And the examples are coming. For example, the first one, the Supremes put a ring on it. This is after the Supreme Court passed the law of marriage equality, and they celebrate it by using the lyrics of a song by Beyoncé. And on next one, it's actually again a song from the boy band NSYNC. I don't know if you remember. Yeah, and they change it B-Y-E into bi in order to state that she is bisexual. And in the Turkish one, there's this famous song which has the lyrics, "Love is blind to reason," but with love they mean actually queer love, and any Turkish person would understand that they're using this song in order to show that you cannot choose who you are going to fall in love with. That's why love is blind to reason. 5 minutes. Okay. And the last examples, using popular elements as public gay figures. In this one, they say, gays, you stay, Trump, sashay away. I don't know if you're familiar with the RuPaul's Drag Race. Yeah, RuPaul is a really famous drag queen in the United States, and he runs a show which is a drag race show. And at the end of every week, he eliminates one drag queen and the other one should stay. And every time he says, the one who stays, you stay, and the other one, sashay away. And they use this catchphrase of RuPaul and put it in another context and say, gays, you stay, and tramp sachets. So tramp can go, but we are gonna stay, or gays are gonna stay. And the last one, in Turkish data, we are the soldiers of Zeki Müren. So Zeki Müren is a late, very famous trans singer in Turkey. In this one, they, on the one hand, criticize militarism by saying we are the soldiers of someone, because it's also a really famous slogan in Turkey, like we are soldiers of this and that. And they try to say if we are supposed to be soldiers of someone, we are going to be soldiers of Zeki Müren, because she's the gay trans icon in Turkey who was really famous back in the day. So it's surprisingly, I mean, the pride discourses of both societies are really similar. So we can ask, why are the pride discourses of these two different societies so similar? And another question which can come out of this study, how is the situation in other languages and other countries? We don't know. So yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions. Anyone? Okay, then I will ask you a question. So, what's the future? Have you thought about analyzing other type of discourses? Or
You mean in the pride?
no, I mean, yeah, exactly, in the pride. Any other type of culture that you would like to investigate?
Well, these are the languages that I know. So that's why I analyze Turkish and English, but I don't know what's going on in other cultures. Maybe if you're from other countries and if you're familiar with the pride discourses in your own country, you can compare and contrast, but definitely it would be worth studying, I guess.
Okay, and apart from criticizing, do you think that this type of discourse has other functions?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is just a part of my thesis. And I also looked at the other functions, like creating a solidarity and and also again constructing identity, and also they do it in different ways, not only through humor but other linguistic strategies. So this is just a small part.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and that's it. So we'll continue after lunch, right?